Clifford Carnicon has a terrific website on this subject. And if you want to remember what it is, it's cliffordcarnicon.com. So try to remember that one if you will, please. He's been a self-employed professional computer consultant for the past 3 years and now resides in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with his wife Carol, who is with us here today. And he was previously a research scientist and federal employee for 15 years with 3 different agencies, including the United States Department of Defense, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Forest Service. His technical background is extensive in the fields of geodetic science, advanced mathematics, computer science, and physical sciences. This subject has been one of quite a controversy. We have what I call a real hot shot weatherman on our Channel 9 who claims there is absolutely nothing to chemtrails. So let's find out what there's nothing to them about. Welcome Clifford Carnicon this afternoon, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I present myself here today as a citizen, an ordinary citizen of the United States, who has taken an interest in recording and documenting what has happened in our skies, most clearly for the last 2 years, with evidence that it has happened for several years prior. The reason that I am here today, or I am here because of 3 people, and I want to give thanks to those people for helping me to arrive. Dean, who has run this conference. Dave Peterson is an individual there running the slides, who is a person behind the scenes that not many people know of, but he's done a great deal of hard work for the last 1.5 years with me, and I consider him a very good friend as well. And my wife, Carol, also. These 3 people all deserve their credit. I have seen relationships destroyed by the material that I will be speaking of. I have seen people lose their jobs. And my wife's support in what I'm doing is very important, and I wish to thank her for that. I think I'd like to start by just giving a general summary of what it is we're talking about. We all grew up and we saw airplanes flying over our head, and these airplanes leave what are called contrails. Contrails stand for condensed trail. It's a mnemonic, a shortened term for the phrase condensed trail. By definition and by all historical reference, a condensed trail of water vapor. About 2 years ago, there appeared on the scene an anomalous event taking place with aircraft over our heads. And these aircraft were leaving trails that did not behave like contrails. And there was a phrase that was coined by a journalist by the name of William Thomas, and the term that he phrased was chemtrail. The trail may be overused by now, but the fact is it actually is an accurate term in the sense of chemical trail, standing for the claim of that trail being a chemical trail as opposed to a water trail. My background is in the sciences, and with due time, if we have enough, my job is to basically make a claim and then present information and evidence for you, not for me, for you to help evaluate those claims and for you to decide if what I am speaking of is the truth or not. Let me say that I really had no intention of becoming involved in this endeavor. I was a pretty quiet federal employee for 15 years. I do like research, and I am inquisitive and curious about my world, but the truth is, I would really not rather be here, other than I would like to speak to you and tell you what needs to be said. I would rather be out riding my horse on the weekends. But the situation is such, with the information that we have, it's very questionable now whether it's a healthy or a wise thing for you to be out in the outdoors as we have been. I spent a good deal of my career in the outdoors as a surveyor and have spent quite a bit of time out on the ground. I'll give you some of the visual characteristics of what we're speaking of first, just so you can draw the distinctions. There is no hard line. My background is pretty strong in mathematics, and I try to quantify things when I can. But sometimes you can't quantify it with our state of knowledge. So I'll give you just some visual characteristics of what we're speaking of, and over time we work on defining them to the best of our ability. Here's some characteristics that you're talking about visually. If you see an aircraft that leaves a trail, and let's also start out with a perfectly clear blue sky, by the way, which is quite the scene, not anything unusual. A perfectly clear blue sky, you'll see a jet aircraft leaving a trail. You have visibility of roughly 100 miles or so each direction. So you're talking about 200 miles of visibility. You're seeing an aircraft which will leave a trail on the far horizon. That trail will be continuous, and you will follow it through for another 100 miles the other side. 200 miles of a continuous, non-dissipating trail. Okay? That's a setup. If you will watch these trails over time, you will see transformations take place, and those trails will frequently and commonly transform themselves into what you might call a cirrus cloud deck or cirrostratus cloud deck, meaning a layer. Let me say that that behavior does not satisfy the behavior of water vapor. And over time, when we want the facts and we get into the nitty-gritty, that's part of what I'll tell you when we devote the time. But it can be stated with a fair degree of certainty that that does not satisfy the physical and chemical behavior of water vapor under those circumstances. Another common characteristic of these visually would be what are called pendrules, the extensions of material that hang down from the trail, very heavy, very dense. Two other things we'd be looking for in terms of signs would be tremendous variation in the colors in the clouds, much more iridescence than that which would be expected naturally. Another thing that we would be looking for would be the halos. Remember, we have all seen halos. We have all seen contrails. We may have even seen colors in the sky. What I'm talking about is a magnitude, okay, a level, a frequency, which is above the norm. That's what makes it anomalous, okay? Halos in the sky have a reason for existing. They exist because of uniform hexagonal columnar crystals in the sky. This is what causes them, okay? They can occur naturally. What I'm saying is the evidence shows that these are in direct appearance and association with the aircraft. It's a regular event. So you have to draw connections and correlations, and that's in my background in terms of what I do, is analyze. Let's try a few slides for a minute. And this is an experiment because the truth is these are taken off the website. We don't know if they'll work. If they work, fine. If you can't see them, then I'll just talk. But I'd like to have you see some visual indicators of what it is that I'm speaking of. This is the website that I maintain that was referenced to. It is my last name. It's only Carnicom, C-A-R-N-I-C-O-M, carnicom.com. It's actually my business site, but I have developed this separately. This is now the result of 2 years of research, primarily independent research. The goal being to collect evidence which I believe will hold up in a court of law. That is a standard that I attempt to apply in my work. Will this hold up in a court of law? Photography is certainly one of the beginning points of that evidence. So this is the opening page to that site. Let's talk about normalcy for a little bit. This slide is presented to you, and hopefully they can be seen. Apparently it's good enough for everyone, I hope. Great. This is normalcy. I'm not here to make wild claims, speculative claims. There's really no need for it. The information is quite evident if we wish to take the time to look at it. I described earlier to you the experience that we've all had growing up watching contrails, and if you want to study chemistry and physics, fine. But this shows that. This is an aircraft that shows a typical set of contrails being formed. Certainly time is a big factor. You need to watch an aircraft over time. That is explicitly why these photographs were taken. They were taken over roughly a 40-second interval, staggered. so that the observer can see the normal and expected behavior of that trail forming very dense to begin with, and over a fairly short period of time basically dissipating into thin air. This is what we have grown up with. This is quite normal. This is customary. This is nothing to be alarmed about. This satisfies perfectly the laws of physics and chemistry of water vapor at altitude. This is the introduction of something that unfortunately is not quite so ordinary. This photograph was the first set that I took that began my work on February 14th, 1999, Valentine's Day. And this is the beginning setup for that situation that I was telling you about. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a high desert region of extremely low humidity. That last point will become more important with our education. Humidity is a significant attribute that we can use to assess what might be normal or abnormal. That trail there, if you noticed that was a trail, a set of photographs taken over roughly a 20-minute interval. And if you notice what you saw there, you saw that single solitary trail in a clear blue sky in a high desert region of low humidity. Right? And then over about 5 minutes you saw a diffusion of that trail, and over about 20 minutes you saw sort of a veiled cloud layer that now appeared. The claim and the point is that that is not water vapor. And that point needs to be proven, and that's my job. That's the start of it. This is a more complete set of progression photos. This taken by an individual in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to the south of me, roughly 50 miles. And this person took the time to stand out there with a camera and over 8 hours interval photograph that sky. And what it shows you is the progression that I'm speaking of from a generally or clearly blue sky in the morning with the appearance of numerous aircraft trails through the day to lead into a progression of an obscured or occluded sky. It's unfortunate that norm is a relative term, and it is now, unfortunately, this that we regard as the norm. That's an extremely unfortunate circumstance that we have gotten ourselves into, and one which needs remedied. So that's a fairly representative set of the phenomenon that I'm speaking of in a general sense. Next slide, if there are any, or if that's the end of it, we'll go back to the lights. Was that the end of that segment? Okay. Yes, I'll do this, and people are you'll have to holler at me for the time, because I know I could go. Okay, next set needs a little intro. Dave wanted me to do a song and dance routine. I'm not a song and dance man, not yet anyway. I've been very serious about this for 2 years straight, and I don't get much of a break. So I'm going to give us 30 seconds of an interlude in that 2 years of a break. The point of this video is that there was a time when we were able to defend ourselves under cloudy skies. Okay? That's the point of this video segment. About 30 seconds long. Unfortunately, we can't not defend ourselves against what is happening right now. After 30 seconds, if this show's all right, after 30 seconds, we'll watch about 5 to 6 minutes of video. Just pay attention, I guess. Observe, absorb as much as you can, and then with fair time, we will discuss what it is that we're seeing. But your first 30 seconds is an interlude, not to be taken too seriously. And it comes quick if it works.
Tastiest, most tender salmon, which is exactly what we at John West want. John West endured the worst to bring you the best.
When you that.
Okay, as these come through here, I will try to give you some narrative that will help you. This opening segment of the video, again, is intended to present normalcy to you. If you watch these trails, they are taken over time. You will watch those trails dissipate entirely as is expected and as is normal. There'll be roughly a minute or two of this. We do need frames of reference. We do need standards. If one presents a claim that something is too, let's say it is abnormal, it helps to have a frame of reference. This is given to you as an introduction. These are taken in a negative view when you see these, simply reversing the role of light and dark. It's very helpful in terms of contrast, and I use it several times during my work to basically help show what we're talking about more clearly. These are all considered normal, and there was a reason for showing you that. This segment now begins what I would have to characterize as abnormal behavior. You cannot see the whole trail here, but anytime that I speak of a aerosol trail or a chemical trail, it satisfies those conditions that I spoke to you of earlier, being continuous, being non-dissipating, being transformational into a cloud deck, frequently having excessive pendule behavior on the lower part of them, having what I'll call core lines, where you'll see a very central dark, a negative view shows it more clearly, very central dark line that is not even as water vapor is. You see those two central lines in here, if you can see them a little hard, but this is not characteristic of the way water vapor would be expected to behave, expand uniformly from an aircraft. These images were taken roughly on April 13th and 14th over Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was rather an extraordinary day. Perfectly clear, perfectly calm, no wind whatsoever. And some of the video work or photography I have taken, once I present that information on the website, the truth is it's very difficult for me to replicate those circumstances. That set in April of 1999 over Santa Fe, this is a remarkable set of circumstances that happened. This is in real time. Each of you saw that both video as well as photography of normal trails showing dissipation over time. This is occurring in real time, so you're watching this trail over the 30 seconds that you're watching, over the 5 to 10, 15, 20 minutes, over the 2 hours that you're watching, okay? And we can drop down the noise actually there. The sound isn't really relevant to any of the video from now on. Again, the claim is made that that does not satisfy the physical and chemical behavior of water vapor. Each of us needs to learn what were the humidity circumstances under that at that day, and does it satisfy it? The claim is that it does not. Each of you will decide for yourself in the end what is normal and abnormal. I will make a very strong claim that I consider it very abnormal. I have developed an analytical model for the dissipation of a contrail, basically asking the question, how much time is expected? I have put my best effort forward to do that. The model that I have created is a function of three things. It's a function of the temperature of the sky, it's a function of the particle size that's expected to be emitted from the aircraft, and it is a result of the amount of heat going into the system, namely solar radiation. The results of that model are completely consistent with what we have seen all of our lives. Contrails composed of water vapor, if you accept my model, which you would need to examine, show that contrails are expected to dissipate within a time frame of anywhere from a second to the longest I have is 2 minutes. Generally, you're talking 10, 15, 30 seconds. They are expected to dissipate. These trails are not dissipating. You have to be asked the question, why? The claim is that they are not water vapor. These here are back to the world of normalcy, just a little bit back, actually we went ahead. This will show the halo that I'm speaking of. You would ask, what is it that causes a halo? Is there an association or a correlation with the appearance of these aircraft? What is the frequency of it? If you ask each of those questions and you seek an honest answer, you will find a direct physical explanation for the appearance of these halos, and you will find them in direct association with the presence of the aircraft operations. An isolated event I will always dismiss. I'm after patterns in my life. These are patterns. This is an unusual event. This was when the material, in the end, if it's not water vapor, it's something else, right? That's a conclusion, and you have to learn what that is. What this is showing you is this, again, does not follow the behavior of water vapor. This, in this case, the material, it has mass, it has density, and the aircraft was cutting through it. They normally don't fly in this way, but an aircraft cut through this material and actually left sort of a tunnel. This is material which was brushed aside as the aircraft went through. Not considered to be norm by any means. These are, how would I say this? As one becomes an observer and becomes aware and astute as to what is occurring overhead, one pays attention to all facets and aspects of our sky. These are cloud patterns, which when one becomes more educated, you may find yourself paying more attention to than normally. That's the end of that segment. So if I can get the lights and or stop this. Probably going to need a little bit of help so I don't screw up on time. What am I roughly? Okay. Let's go over, now getting away a little bit from just the visual side of things, let's go over some factual reasons, I would consider them factual, why we would know that we're not dealing with water vapor. About 5 or 6 of these that we have right now. Number one would be a historical record. Jet aircraft were invented at the close of World War II, right? If this phenomenon had been occurring since the close of World War II, would we not expect a body of evidence that shows that this is the case? I would think it would be reasonable to say that there should be a historical record of that evidence since the jet engine evolved. Fact is, it's not. Why did hundreds, let's start with, why did thousands to hundreds of thousands of people across this country start taking photographs and imagery like this at the beginning of 1999? Why did they decide to do that? It is reasonable to say that they observed an anomaly in their historical basis and frame of reference. Point number one, there is no historical record which shows the existence of this behavior. Number two would be relative humidity studies. I have done studies which attempt to examine the question. They ask the question, when do clouds form? I'm learning all the time. I'm in many different fields of research all the time, and it's because I simply need to know the answer to the question. And when I see something like that, and I see a cloud forming on a clear blue sky in a desert sky, the question arises, when do clouds form? I have studied that question. I'll give you the short version now. We'll talk more if you want to. Short version is that all reliable sources, including Vincent Schaefer, who invented cloud seeding in 1946, the Naval Postgraduate Meteorology Department in Monterey, Institute of Atmospheric Research, every reliable source that I have found states that cloud formation is never expected to begin at relative humidity levels less than 70%. Okay? And in fact, it's expected to be more than that most of the time. That's the lowest limit. And the reason that occurs is along the ocean in salty environments where it loves water. Okay? I'm talking about situations where the relative humidity is 20 and 30%. I have done a statistical study to examine the question, is there a significant difference between the days that this occurs versus the norm? And the fact is, there is no statistical difference in terms of the weather, right? So one cannot make the claim that relative humidity explains this phenomenon. It is not adequate. Number three would be the size of the particles. Clouds form from little bitty particles in the sky. Question, how big are those particles? What size are they? Because that's important. So I look up and I find out what comes out of jet aircraft. What size are these things? Here's the number I find. Max Planck Institute, they're the leading atmospheric research institute of the world. They say 30 to 200 microns is how big they are. Well, how big is that? We'll need a sense of scale as we go on. A human hair is roughly 60 to 100 microns thick. Okay? A blood cell is about 8, and bacteria and viruses would be down at very, very low levels. Max Planck says 30 to 200 microns. So big, right? Whatever it is. Lets you know what it is relative to a hair. When do clouds form? What size are the particles that clouds form from? Average size, 2 to 3/10 of a micron. Okay? I've got a problem. I've got a problem that the expected size of the particles from the emissions of aircraft are not even suitable for cloud formation to begin with. I mentioned the dissipation model, the quantitative model that I've worked at in terms of the amount of time that it takes. That's another reason that the claim can be made that that's not water vapor. I'll skip one and I'll go to the source, the United States Air Force themselves. What do they say? The United States Air Force has written a letter to the public, basically through a senator. The letter claims that the so-called ChemTrail phenomenon, you won't hear me using that word a whole lot, but you will hear the word aerosol quite a bit from me. The United States Air Force states that the ChemTrail phenomenon is a hoax. That it's a hoax that was started roughly 3 years ago. And the United States Air Force says that this phenomenon that I speak to you of has been investigated thoroughly by every major university and media organization in this country. This is what they claim. You seldom hear me use the word lie, but I have used the word lie with respect to that claim because those claims are false. Okay? The United States Air Force, within that same letter, states that contrails are expected to dissipate rapidly. Okay? And number two, contrails form roughly a wingspan behind the aircraft. We will show you information over time that shows that it's not a wingspan away, okay, and that they don't dissipate rapidly. Therefore, they do not satisfy the United States Air Force's very definition of a contrail. These are points that can be made as to why I can claim that that is not water vapor, and it's my job to give you the information. Next topic. Do we have some slides that we wanted to show there at all? We'll try to fill in. I'd like to augment what I'm speaking of. I haven't had this opportunity, to tell you the truth. I've done some radio interviews. First chance I've had to speak to people, and I appreciate that. We have some imagery that I'd like to give you to help out augment what I'm speaking of. I guess you have a couple more sets for us. I entitled this photograph, The Santa Fe Blitz. What was it, April 17th? I can't remember the day there. April 17th, possibly? Pardon me? 18th, not bad, of 1999, this one is. What you see are a set of radiating, persistent, continuous trails that transform themselves into a cloud deck. I do not consider this to be representative of normal air traffic over Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I ask you, what is it? This is a photograph taken on November 30th of that same year over Santa Fe. I speak for what I can record. I avoid speculation because, as I have said, there is no need for it. This is the information. This is what I can provide. There's no need to extend ourselves. Let's explain this. I sent a letter to the United States, take that back, State Attorney General of New Mexico with a claim for investigation. I received a letter back from the Attorney General, Patricia Madrid, that anything that I show you is well within the, quote, range of normal aerial activity, unquote. Oh, incidentally, that photograph on November 30th, I will mention that there was a protest scheduled in Washington, D.C. on that very day, November 30th. Truth is that protest was a joke. 5 people showed up because, unfortunately, we are not aware of what's going on to that level yet. But the people did put forth a good effort, and they tried. That activity that you saw there was taken on the day of that protest. These are phenomenal photographs that do exist. I term them the mega sprayer. I have to give you the information, and you decide. Here's the information. This trail, and anything I speak of is not an isolated event. I only speak when I start to have a pattern or record. I have 5 of these. Unusual period in the fall of 1999. If you look at this material, you will see, by, I think, all reasonable interpretations, it appears to extend across the full wing of the aircraft. That is essentially a continuous trail. Most aircraft are roughly 150, 160 feet wide, somewhere in there. You do not see two isolated trails from that aircraft. You see a continuous stream across the full wingspan of that aircraft. I need to back up on that. That's okay, I can talk about it. I don't know if you can go back on that or not, but there's another very important observation about that, besides the fact that it comes across the wing full length. The question is, where are the engines of that aircraft? The answer is, the engines to that aircraft are in the rear of the aircraft along the fuselage. Do you see those two extensions right near the tail of the aircraft? That's a DC-9 or MD-80 class, I guess. I'm not an expert in aviation types, but I do my best. Those aircraft are on the rear of the engine along the fuselage. Question, how can you have an emission of materials across the full wingspan when the engines are located in the rear, tightened up along the fuselage? Okay. I know about the claims that are made of whatever vortice contrails and this type of stuff. Unfortunately, they don't satisfy the observations. Okay, if you can go ahead, I have about 3 or 4 of these. This was a unique period. I classify as a unique period in the fall of 1999. My own interpretation, honestly, is that this was an effort to push it as far as it could go, basically, and see what people would tolerate. How many? 25. Thank you very much. Those events that I just recorded on what I call the megaspire, they ceased immediately after I began putting these photographs up on the website. I have not seen them again. Other people have claimed them, but again, I speak only for what I can do. Those photographs were recorded over Santa Fe, New Mexico, with the exception of the white one you just saw, which was in Paonia, Colorado. This is representative of, let's say, again, abnormal behavior of a discrete break in the emission of material. Whether you want to call it water vapor or not, it indicates a discrete break. There are those that claim that, oh, you have a meteorological condition up there that's providing for this. I would dispute that. I would dispute that level of discreteness in dynamic systems, what would be called a fluid environment of the atmosphere. And that's the last one. And actually there was, I'd have to call it pretty ugly, to tell you the truth, in terms of the visual nature, the colors there. It looked basically like oil in terms of the color. Those refractive colors you see in the imagery, those are real, and they're actually even more pronounced in the photograph as the sun is shining through this. Not representative of water vapor. And what we're speaking of now in general is the question of evidence. What type of evidence exists? One type of evidence that can be collected is photographic evidence. You've seen several photographs that may be of interest to you. This is a larger scale picture. This is satellite view. It's not difficult right now to come up with satellite imagery. There are citizens across the country that are doing it, collecting imagery by satellites that show systematic, grid-like trail emissions over very large geographic areas. There are many of these that exist. There are those, I am familiar with most of the claims that are made against the argument presented. The claim here would be that these are ship trails. These are coming out of the smokestacks of ships on the ocean. I would dispute that claim. All right, here's where we need to allow that the world's not quite so clear-cut as we might hope. Early in the research here, I made a claim also. I said, well, it appears that there's a mechanical fixture or nozzle where this material appears to be emitted, primarily the stabilizer region of the aircraft. With the information I had at that time, that was a valid point of view. Over time, I will simply say that we have to allow for ambiguity as to the methods of delivery. The information evidence shows that there is more than one method of delivery of material, non-water vapor material, from these aircraft. And the reason I present this is that, and there is this pointer, I was told. Great, you can see that? This is important right here because I have taken scores and scores of photographs where visually it appears that this material comes right out of the stabilizer region. And that's why that claim was made. However, I have examined this question in great detail because in the end, you see, it is very important to know where is this coming from, what is the method of delivery. and now understanding that it apparently varies. But with very close examination, I have found, literally, like I took a stretch of 12 photos, just all staggered, and every single one looked just like this, where every one was coming right out of the stabilizer. Then I got one photograph that showed some pixels right there in front, okay, of the tail. That refutes the theory or claim that it's coming directly from the stabilizers, okay? And it supports the claim that it is associated or tied in with engine emissions of some type. My best information thus far does indicate that it is very likely a combustive process that is involved within a major component of the delivery of this material from the aircraft. And I will not eliminate combustive processes whatsoever. These are actually fairly early, but you will see this pattern of appearing to come from the stabilizers. But if you examine it very closely under, magnification, you will find some of these pixels forward of that. It has to consider the possibility of engine involvement. This is really a most unusual photograph because this is one that no matter how hard I look, it's very poor contrast, I realize that, but it's clear enough on the original photo to see. This one, I can't pin a single pixel forward of that stabilizer. It literally appears to be coming right out of a cone. It fans out very quickly right from the stabilizer region. And it indicates, in this case, an association with the stabilizer. So we need to allow for and admit ambiguity when it exists, and simply say that it appears as though there is more than one method of delivery of material, aerosol material from these aircraft. And is that the end of that segment? Thanks. And then I guess we're ready for the lights again. Okay, the point being there that there's evidence. We don't need to speculate. Let's go after the evidence, okay? This is one type of evidence. I have a half a dozen here. I won't have time to go over them now. Half a dozen types of evidence. This is photographic evidence. I can only submit it to you as an important starting point. I'm going to have to go on because I want to try and cover at least main points so that if you have further curiosity, you're welcome to attend the workshop that I will give this evening and get into this in a little bit more depth. I want to mention to you what I consider 5 cornerstones or keystones of the research that I have done thus far. One of the things I've noticed that's interesting is that as a species, we can show them a photograph and we can see it, and it still doesn't mean it's real to us anymore. We can say, we can imagine it's faked, whatever, but there's something about the human process, even if you show them an image, they don't even necessarily know that it's real anymore. We don't know what's real. So because of that, I have to use my background, my tools to try and dig into those things that are independent of the observer, right? This means the world of science, the best that we can, okay? There's 5 of these that I've identified. The purpose is to create something that can be replicated that's independent of the observer. Number 1 was the relative humidity study that I've already mentioned, right? This is an objective method that each of us can use to examine, is it realistic what's going on there? Satisfies the criteria of being independent. Number 2, rather astounding findings, I feel. I don't have the time to tell you the reason that I did it. But let us say that through a process of deduction and analysis, I was led to the supposition, to the proposition, that we may wish to examine the acidity, the pH of our atmosphere. Okay? And I'm a person down here on the ground, and these things are 7 miles above, and I don't have much in terms of resources. But you think, and you do the best you can. And this was an idea that came to mind because of deduction, not by accident. And what do I have available to me? Rainwater. So one day I went out and I started collecting the rainwater. And I got out my little aquarium kit and I started testing the pH of this rainwater. It was a very interesting finding because first of all I had to educate myself on what the expected pH of the rainfall was expected. That was a learning experience. It's not neutral like you might think. Most of us might be familiar with the acid-alkaline scale, but rainfall is not neutral. I didn't really know that. It's expected to be at 5.6. I got my results. The results were showing rainfall alkalinity at a much higher level than is expected. Caught my attention. Actually, those results fit perfectly with the deduction. It's just that I didn't know that until I learned what rainwater was supposed to be, that it's actually more alkaline than it should be, okay? I had my Santa Fe samples that I worked with. I said, hey, this is interesting. I wonder if other citizens in the country are interested in investigating this. And I opened up this question on the website to citizens across the country. Would you be willing or would you be interested in testing your rainfall? We have roughly 70 observations thus far from citizens across the country in roughly 15 states now. The results of those observations, and this is at the grassroots level, you can't get any lower than this. This is people that care enough to go out with their little aquarium kit or buy a pH meter and grab their rainfall and test it. You got to give these folks a lot of credit. They do this. Here's the result. From that data set, which would be considered significant statistically, 30 would be a breaking point. From that data set, the evidence indicates that the alkalinity level of the atmosphere, as exemplified through the rainfall, has increased by a factor of 20 to 25 times within the last year versus however long, literally millennium. I have databases, standards of reference going back from 1990, 1997, even 1998. I have these frames of reference. They show no change. It's steady as could be. 1998, or the year 2000 data sticks out like you wouldn't believe. You are talking about alteration of one of the most significant environmental aspects of our world that we could possibly imagine. Our atmosphere. Do you remember the amount of attention that was given and attached to the acid rain problem in the 70s and 80s? How many billions of dollars were spent on researching those events, right? I have citizens across the country with aquarium sets trying to present data at the most fundamental, rudimentary level that shows there is a major change taking place. I think it's astounding because you have to balance that against not just 1990, you're talking about the planetary system for eons. And the data is showing an extraordinary change within 12 months. And I'll go through 3 more real quick and then get on with it. Third would be electrolysis work that I've done. You have ideas. The claim being that, okay, if the pH is up, you did that for a reason because you thought that there was an increase in a certain type of material, hydroxide, in that rainfall. Then another proposition is electrolysis. It means it should conduct electricity better. That's how batteries work. You put salts in water and they conduct, right? So I did it. Again, the evidence is consistent with the supposition that there is physical material, this is not metaphysical, or physical material in that rainfall, which satisfies certain criteria that were expected, especially of a hydroxide nature. Number 4 would be spectrometry. Spectrometry is a very expensive field to get into. One of the questions that's going to come up as we go along is, where the heck are the professionals? Where are they? I mean, I don't have these resources, but I do the best I can. And literally, I start out going to the toy store buying a $30 microscope. That's how I got started in my work, okay? I find a visual light spectrometer and buy it. Not an easy thing for me to do. But I bought 2 of them, one prism and one diffraction grating. I made observations of the sunlight. What's the purpose of spectrometry? It's a tool that's used to analytically identify the existence of certain elements in our world. Our world is actually simpler than most of us think. It's like 113 things make up this whole world. Spectrometry is fascinating, but you try to identify what's up there, okay? My observations, I can only record and report my observations. My observations show the existence of an unexpected elemental presence of barium in the atmospheric light. That is a very important, significant finding if it bears itself out to be true. When I'm speaking of things, it's a composite picture that I'm trying to make consistent, not just an individual thing. And we need more time to talk about, well, why barium? Why did you test for pH? But there is a very logical set of deductions that are consistent. And the existence of barium is consistent with all of these deductions that have been made. Barium is worthy of discussion. I probably won't have time to take it right now, but there's significant implications if those findings are proven correct. And the last one would be particulate matter in our skies. And this is information that has come since January 3rd of this year. This is very recent information. It's extremely important, I feel, because basically the existence of such material has been predicted through analysis and deduction that there is something up there. Indeed, it's not water. And January 3rd, I was able to capture information on film that I think makes a very good case that there is something in the atmosphere that is not water vapor. I did that work. I like to give credit where it's due. That work was done because of a message board that I maintain. I have had many struggles in my work, and there are those that have attempted to shut down what I have done with great effort. One of those roles that I have filled is to allow a place where people can speak on this issue freely. It is the result of that work on the message board by citizens across the country, in the same vein as the pH work that I was telling you about, that observations were made that described the existence of this particulate matter. They made the observations. I simply followed up and said, hey, can I get that on film? So there is no single individual here that deserves claim or credit to what we're learning. And in the end, my inquiry to you will be, will you get involved? Okay? I think we have a couple more slides to show. This, boy, it's not interesting, but it's important, I suppose. This is a skew-T diagram. The reason for showing this is that if you start talking about relative humidity, you need to get the data. That's what I do. I get the data at flight altitude, 35,000 feet. I look at the relative humidity dew point, and I look at the expected conditions, and I look above in the skies, and I say, does that make sense? This is shown for you to know that in the end, we dig up what we need to answer the questions. That's all. This, I'm going to mention this one because actually there was an inquiry earlier today about this relative humidity. I gave you the results of the initial study I did. That was done in August. This is important because this is very contemporary. This was taken on February 4th of this year, only a few days ago. This is over Santa Fe, New Mexico. Here's the situation you have to reckon with. February 4th, relative humidity at flight altitude was 20%. I looked it up and I calculated it from the database from NOAA. 20%, and this is what you saw in the skies on February 4th over Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was really an extraordinary day, not isolated, but still extraordinary. I counted roughly 100 to 150 passes of aircraft within an hour and a half over Santa Fe in the morning. Okay? I would claim that that does not satisfy the commercial aircraft traffic patterns. That's what happens on February 4th, right? The next day, February 5th, I do the same thing. I look up the relative humidity I computed on through the tools on the site and such. What do I get? I get 30%. Remember that breaking point was 70%, right? And that was under unusual conditions. It's really expected to be higher. That's because of the influence of salt. I got 30%, essentially no difference statistically. What happened in the skies on February 5th? Not a trace in the sky. Not a single trail to that effect that you are seeing today. The question is, why? How could that be? I spoke to you of the pH studies that have resulted from citizens involved across the country. This is a plot which shows the results of that study. The red is now. The gray and the black, of which there are two sets, are before. Now being 2000, before being 1990 and 1999. I would claim that that is a statistically significant difference, both by quantitative means that I've measured, as well as just submit to you visually that we have a recognized difference between the pH values as measured contemporarily versus past time, and that the order of magnitude is on the level of 20 to 25 times increase in alkalinity. It's a logarithmic scale, so it's a power of 10. So a little change goes a long way is what it amounts to. This is simply involved with the spectrometry work. Don't worry about trying to read the numbers. I'm simply trying to show you some of the work that's behind this thing. That was a tabulation of the observations that I have done through spectrometry and an analysis of what should be there and what is it that I'm finding. This is a photograph that relates to the particulate matter that I'm speaking of. And these are important to see. I hope we have time to get to the video because I need to. This was, January 3rd of this year over Santa Fe, New Mexico. In that picture, you saw what appeared to be a perfectly clear blue sky, right? There was no wind that day. January 1st, however, was a very intensive day of aerosol activities. 2 days later, and if you calculate the drift rate of materials, microscopic material, 2 days is not out of line at all for a material expected to descend to the ground. The sky on January 3rd appeared perfectly clear 2 days after intensive aerosol activities on the 1st. With certain techniques, which I will describe in detail, but this is real. Again, this is not something metaphysical. This is a plain old Sony video camera from Walmart for $300 that, when it's used properly, captures the existence of particulate matter in the atmosphere at extraordinary levels of saturation that few of us could imagine. Thank you very much. And is visible only under very specific lighting conditions. And the setup here is that that's a roof of a building. There's a lot of magnification going on here, so I don't mean you just point up a camera and you get it. It's very specific lighting conditions. But basically, if you set yourself up where you get the corona effect of the sun, maximum brilliance of the sun without actually looking at the sun, and you're able to magnify, you can't actually see it with the naked eye, but this is roughly 40 power magnification. And fortunately, this video camera is able to adjust to the light sufficiently, because normally it will blind anything, and is able to capture this material. I want to stop that because I want you to see the video of this. It's difficult to present things on the internet in terms of resolution. That's why I appreciate the opportunity to be here. The truth is, there is no one other than a few individuals that have seen this video, simply because I do not have the mechanisms or tools yet to get that information out to the world. But I will say, I don't know if we can get let me get the lights for just a minute, and then I'll shut them off like in 30 seconds if I can, please, and thank you. Anyone that I have shown this video to, I see a look of shock in their face, a look of sort of disbelief that, oh, this is there? Okay. This is a video segment of what you're seeing, what you just saw there. This is taken on that situation where I'm talking about. There's not a single day that I have not gone out and been able to do this. Again, the question of replication, I can do this every time I've tried now. Some days more intense than others in terms of saturation. I've done it in 4 places right now, including Arches National Park in the middle of Utah, in one of the most pristine environments you would ever expect. I get the same result, okay? I'm going to see if, I'm going to have to skip a whole video segment that we didn't even get to talk about. Well, you know how everybody tempts you with the workshop, right? So that's my temptation to the workshop, is that I guess we're going to miss a very important segment simply because we don't have time to discuss it now. But when I mentioned, well, no, I just didn't have time. Sorry, but when I was talking about physical evidence, and I said photographs are one form of evidence, you're scanning through right now another very important body of evidence which exists that we just don't have the time to see right now. And in the workshop, we can certainly go over it. What I will say is that this is fibrous material that has been received now 4 times. 4 independent parties, 4 independent locations, 4 independent times. The material is identical in all respects. It's highly unusual. It has been sent to the Administrative Environmental Protection Agency for identification. That was, I'm sorry, where are we at? Oh, we're going. I got to find this. Okay, you're going to skip some. You saw the blue building, okay? This is, I have to say, this is what I record in our skies. This material is, by all indications, incredibly small, smaller than we could imagine. It appears to be at the submicron to maybe a few microns in size. It is available, like I say, anytime that I go out to receive it. It is entirely consistent with all of the analysis and deduction and work that's been done over the last 2 years, which basically predict the existence of such material. It's significant in terms of its behavior. It appears to be electrically charged. That's a significant finding. So I probably went, I'm going to try to back up on just a little bit of it again. Let's see if that'll go back any. The statement about being electrically charged is a highly significant statement that has severe implications and ramifications for the application. If you were to find such material in the sky, what are the applications? And I'm simply not going to have to talk, I'm not going to have enough time to talk about it. But again, in a short version, my research leads me to a very strong association and implication of military applications with the existence of this material. And that's about as far as I'm going to be able to go right now. The light's on again, I guess, and I'll finish my last 10 seconds. I want to thank you very much for your time and attention that you have given to this matter. I do hope that you choose to get involved in what I'm speaking about. I just barely broke into some of the material that we have, but I gave you enough to hopefully ask why and what is going on. And I do thank you for your time.